Audio or video footage used in this video is owned entirely by the copyright holders. Horrific FX makes no claim of ownership and is simply using the footage for purposes of education, commentary, and criticism under fair use. Hello and welcome to another video on our YouTube series of Horrific FX's Top 13. This month we're deciding to go, instead of going along the lines of counting down movies or theme songs as we've done in the last couple of videos, decided to do a little bit different here and do something television related. Now, this video is going to be released in December of 2018, and I don't know about many of you, but one of my all-time favorite things to do, especially on New Year's Eve, is the annual Twilight Zone marathon on the Sci-Fi Channel. It's always one of my absolute favorites as a lifelong Twilight Zone fan, and it's always fun to just sit on the couch and enjoy the Twilight Zone episodes. Now, I'm not a big party-going guy. I have kids, and my daughter, who's a teenager, she loves to watch these episodes with me. In fact, one of her favorites is on this countdown. So I decided, since the Twilight Zone New Year's countdown on Sci-Fi will be happening on December 31st, why not do a countdown of Horrific FX's top 13 Twilight Zone episodes. Number 13, The Shelter. Now, before I keep going on with this video, I'd like to point out there will be spoilers. I will be talking about the numerous twists that happen in each episode. So if you have not seen these episodes, please skip forward or go watch these episodes and then come back. I do not want to be responsible for anyone being upset at me for spoiling any potential episodes they have not seen. So that was your warning. If you're still decided to listen, we'll get on with number 13 here, The Shelter. This is a huge favorite of mine. I think is very, very underrated in the Twilight Zone universe. You have such classic episodes, as we'll be going on later in this video, but everyone always talks about those episodes, and hardly anyone ever mentions The Shelter, which I think is obviously, those of you who have seen it know it's not that scary of an episode. It's not horror related or sci-fi really related, but it does delve into the darkness of humans and what happens in this episode. There's a supposed Russian nuclear bomb heading to the United States, and this group of people decide to break up their dinner party, to get to their houses and prepare for the upcoming blast. During this episode, you discover that the local neighborhood doctor has built a bomb shelter in his house, and he and his family go into the shelter. And while the doctor was planning and building his shelter, the other families failed to do so, and now they all want into the shelter, which is not designed for more than 3 people. And all chaos ensues when everyone tries to scratch and claw their way, figuratively, into the shelter. And it just is I think is a really good episode, showing the darkness that humankind can lead to in times of death and despair. Number 12, The Living Doll. Now, earlier in the video, I mentioned my daughter's personal favorite. This has always been her personal favorite. She loves dolls. Actually, she has her own business. As anyone who knows me and has seen the other videos I posted, I'm a special effects makeup artist, and I go to numerous shows throughout the year, conventions, and have tables selling my products and props and prosthetics. And a local show here in nearby Canton, Michigan. Every year there's a an event, and I have a table, two tables there selling my products. And there's a table for my daughter, and she sells dolls that she takes from a dollar store and just distorts and makes them creepy and so forth. And she also sells stuff like bath bombs and so forth. But she loves creepy dolls, and from the very first moment she ever saw this Twilight Zone episode, she just fell in love with it. Anyone who hasn't seen it, it revolves around this stepfather who you can tell just does not like his his stepdaughter, and she gets a doll called Talkie Tina, and basically throughout the episode, verbally threatens the stepfather. And this was a fun episode to watch. I remember the first time watching it, really liking it. And this was before the era of Annabelle and Chucky, before killer dolls weren't as popular as they are now. Um, I can't think of a killer doll that was even before Talkie Tina. So a really good, really good episode to watch. Number 11. The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street. Now, I know I'll get a lot of slack for this, considering this is a very popular episode of The Twilight Zone. And it's not that I don't like it, I do like it a lot. I just don't personally like it as much as other episodes, but I also do understand its importance to very many people who are fans of the show. This is a classic episode, one of the episodes when you mention Twilight Zone, a lot of people immediately think of. It's about a local small town neighborhood where all of a sudden all these weird happenings occur. Noises, power going out, lights going on and off, and this theory that there's aliens among them. And kind of like The Shelter, where you kind of get a taste of what mankind is capable of in times of extreme distress. That's what happens here. The neighborhood starts pointing fingers at each other, blaming each other, accusing each other of being aliens when they aren't. And just a very good episode of The Twilight Zone, really hitting home um, about the how a distress situation can affect humans. Number 10. Will the real Martian please stand up? Now, this is a huge favorite of mine, especially on the New Year's Eve marathon or New Year's marathon. Now, usually they run marathons sometimes on the 4th of July, but this is one I always love on New Year's. Being in the Michigan area, it's always snowy and so forth. And the setting in this one, I still remember outside the restaurant, the snow, and of course, the bridge was iced over. Now, this story revolves around a small diner where there's a group of people, and one of them is a Martian, and you don't know who it is. And all these subtle little hints they throw at you, thinking it might be this character, it might be that character. Who is it? And again, spoilers when they finally reveal the ending as to the Martians, that's Martians plural, or space aliens plural, not really Martians plural, since one was from Venus. But that big twist, you think you found out who it was when you find out the outer space alien with 3 arms, and then it's revealed that there is in fact another one who is from a different planet with the 3 eyes. And it was great, a great visual. I'll never forget that whole ending, watching that as a kid and seeing that ending with the 3-armed man and the 3-eyed man. Just what a visual treat that was. Number 9. The Invaders. Now, this is an episode that took a lot of guts, I think, when it came out. Obviously, it was before my time, but remember watching it thinking, wow, this is one of the first episodes I can ever remember of a TV show where you see just one person the entire episode. It revolves around this lady who lives almost like a hermit in a small secluded house, and all of a sudden there's these invaders from a different planet, and she is frightened for her life and keeps trying to defend her home. Now, these invaders are small and can sneak into little areas and so forth. And it creates a claustrophobic feel. You don't know where they're at and how she's going to protect herself. And then at the end of the episode, the big twist, again, more spoilers, when she destroys the alien spacecraft, and you hear the voices on the spacecraft radio saying that they're United States citizens, astronauts, and to leave the atmosphere, there's a race of giants on the planet. So that was another great twist to a classic Twilight Zone episode. Number 8, It's a Good Life. Again, another classic. I mean, as every episode on this list is a classic. But this is another really popular episode. A great twist, which they kind of give you the twist right up front in the episode. You're told about this quiet town that is suffering from a monster who, whatever the monster thinks of, can happen. If the monster's not happy with something, he wishes it away, or as they say in the episode, wishes it into the cornfield and it disappears. Or it can turn, an animal into a two-headed monster or something like that. And they flat out tell you, Rod Serling flat out tells you at the beginning of the episode, the monster is a little boy. And what a classic character in the Twilight Zone universe. Billy Fremont, and that face of his, and just him pointing at something and wishing it to the cornfield, and his destructive nature as everyone, all the adults in the town, are fearful of thinking the wrong thing as he can hear their thoughts and wish them away. And that classic ending where the the older man who was celebrating his birthday, probably had a little too much to drink, was telling one of the other adults to bash him over the head, but they couldn't do it enough, and he got wished by Billy into a Jack in the Box. And that classic shock moment for a Twilight Zone episode. Just great, great work. Number 7, The Midnight Sun. Now, I mentioned before how my daughter's favorite episode was on this countdown a little earlier. This happens to be my son's favorite episode. Um, Always one that 9 times out of 10, you'll find on airing at midnight on the Twilight Zone marathon on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. This is one of the very first episodes I was ever introduced to, and I really like it because a lot of people like the heat. Me personally, I'm a big fan of the cold. I love, not just because of it's Halloween, but I love fall weather. And I do very, very poorly in the heat. And I actually remember 2 years ago working at the haunted house that I do make special effects makeup for, and I act there. And that year we had just 80, 90-degree heat in October, and just feeling so hot, and I just hate that heated feeling. So this episode really stuck with me when I was growing up and saw it for the first time. Basically, the planet is off of its axis and is penetrating closer and closer to the sun, to the point that there's no more night now. Everything is blistering hot. Everything is scarce: air conditioning, cold water, supplies. And basically, it's only days until the earth just melts. And I want to say claustrophobic nature of the episode, even though you're not really claustrophobic in that sense, but just the sense of dread. You're enclosed in with the heat of the sun, and great paranoia and exhaust, down to the fact that in every scene you had all the actors in the episode just drenched in sweat, and you could feel that claustrophobic feeling of no escape from the heat. And then again, the big twist at the end when the main character was just dreaming, and in all actuality, the Earth has gone off its axis the other way, moving farther and farther from the sun, and everything is blistering cold. Number 6. 5 characters in search of an exit. Now, this is an episode I really, really like. I love Halloween and horror, but I do love Christmas time too. And obviously, anyone who has seen this episode knows how it's related to the Christmas holiday. And the fact that, as much as I love horror, this doesn't have a real horror-esque feel to the episode, but the mystery around it and the great characters. The story revolves around these 5 characters that basically awaken in this pit, and they're trying to figure out what's going on, where are they, how are they all connected. There's a clown, a bagpipe player, a ballerina, a hobo, a general, um, and they're basically just, again, all trapped in this pit and trying to get out during the whole episode. And then at the end of the episode, when you see what happens, again, spoiler, the general gets out of the pit, falls down to the ground, and then you discover they're really toys from a toy drive for at Christmas time. And that's how they're all connected. And just a great twist, which wasn't a horrifying twist, but just the fact that you're with these characters during this whole episode, and then you find out they're really toys. And it leaves them on a sad note when you see them, but then in Rod Serling's explanation at the end of the episode saying that it won't be horrifying for them much longer, as they'll have new children to love them and play with them and take care of them. So a nice happy ending, which you sometimes rarely get in the Twilight Zone. Number 5. The Masks. Now, for the longest time, this was one of my top episodes, like number 1 or 2, until I really, as I got older, started watching more and more episodes of The Twilight Zone. This was the episode that, for the first few years that I watched Twilight Zone growing up, it seemed like it was always on when I watched it. And it's just an episode that really stuck with me. Basically revolves around the story of this older man who is on his deathbed. He invites his family, his uh, daughter, son-in-law, and their 2 children. And the family is basically there just to collect his inheritance as soon as he passes. And he knows this, and he's arranged for them all to wear masks as it's set in New Orleans during Mardi Gras, and says that he knows why they're there, and says that they will all get their inheritance as long as they each wear this specially designed mask for each of them until midnight. And if they fail to, they will receive fare, travel fare back home, and that will be it. And each of the masks has something to do with their personality. And I just remember watching this episode and thinking the masks were so grotesque and macabre, especially considering that time frame in the 60s. I just thought those masks were so kind of disturbing when I was growing up. Again, I was real little when I saw this episode. And then the big twist at the end, when the old man dies, they start celebrating when they remove their masks. Their faces have morphed or transformed into the mask, the shape and design of each of their masks. And I still remember the moment when they reveal their mask and you hear that noise, the music noise that came with it. It was just so, so eerie, and such a macabre moment. I just loved it, and a great moral lesson too. So definitely a fun episode to check out if you've never seen that episode. Number 4, The Eye of the Beholder. Now this is the part of the countdown where we're getting into the classic episodes that I think everyone knows and loves. And this episode, as I mentioned in the episode of The Invaders, how daring it was to have an episode basically just featuring one person, one character. The same sort of thing in this episode, where the whole episode until the very end, when you have the reveal, you don't see anyone's faces. You have several characters, but they're all either in the shadows or the main character has her face bandaged up. Really daring for an episode. And the episode revolves around this girl who is in for, let's say, plastic surgery for, I believe it's like the 12th time or something. And the nation that they live in, as they call it, the state, I believe, they say the state only allows you a certain amount of times to have this surgery to change your appearance, um, to change yourself from being one of the undesirables, as they call it, or refer to. And so she's at her limit, and at the end they take off the bandages and reveal she's a normal looking human being to our standards. And she starts freaking out because there's no change. And as she tries to run away, the doctors and nurses hold her down to sedate her or so forth. And it's revealed that they're the ugly ones, but that whole state there, everyone looks like that. So even though she looks normal to us, she's of the different than the norm. So that's where the Eye of the Beholder title came from. And great special effects makeup. I always refer to them as the piggy people because they have their noses pulled up like they were pig people almost. And again, as a special effects makeup artist, I always notice the makeup. So that was really fun and a great twist. Number 3, Nightmare at 20,000 feet. Now, if you talk to a true Twilight Zone fan, this will be either number 1 or 2 on their all-time list. And most people will think of this episode when you mention the Twilight Zone. Uh, and this is one of the great performances of Mr. William Shatner. Um, and basically, the episode revolves around William Shatner's character who had a mental breakdown on a plane and was in an institution, and he was released, and now he's flying back home with his wife. And when you think he's starting to finally feel better, now he starts seeing this gremlin on the wings of the plane and tearing apart the plane. And he's the only one that sees it. Every time he calls someone over to check it out, the gremlin disappears and no one sees it, and everyone starts believing him to be insane again and having a breakdown. And he has to find a way to stop the gremlin. And of course, the famous scene and line you remember from the episode. There's something on the wing of the plane, and this episode was actually done in the Twilight Zone movie, the famous movie from 1983, which had the tragic accident. But they remade this story in the Twilight Zone movie with John Lithgow taking over William Shatner's role. And just a great story and a visual, and definitely one of the all-time great episodes of The Twilight Zone. Number 2, Time Enough at Last. Now, just like with Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, this is the other episode that most people will mention when they talk about Twilight Zone. And, you can't say much to knock this episode. It's a classic episode. And again, not much horror or scares or intense moments, uh, but it hits you. Basically, the story revolves around this character played by Burgess Meredith in a great performance in my mind. He loves reading. Yeah, even at work as a bank teller, he tries to read. During lunchtime goes into the bank vault to read. He gets home and his wife hates him reading, and she's always doting on him and tearing up his books and marking up his books so he can't read. And all of a sudden, during lunch one day, while reading a book in the vault, a nuclear bomb goes off and destroys mankind. And he survives since he was in the bank vault. And now the whole episode, he's just fighting the boredom. There's no one to talk to, nothing to do. And just when he's about ready to pull a gun and kill himself, he discovers a library and finds several books that are still alive, around and not destroyed. And now he has new meaning and purpose in his life. He can read finally. He says there's enough food from all the canned foods and so forth, and now there's time enough at last to read all his books. And then the unfortunate thing, he slips on some gravel and his glasses break and shatter. So now he can't read any of these books. And just an unfortunate situation, but a great, great twist for a classic episode of The Twilight Zone. Number 1, To Serve Man. Now, obviously, as in the being number 1, this is my all-time favorite episode. Um, I know this wouldn't be number 1 on many people's favorite episodes, but just me personally, I love this episode. It's one of the few episodes, if not the only one, I believe, where Rod Serling did not do the beginning voiceover for the episode. He did at the end of the episode, but not necessarily the beginning. But still, a terrific work in the Twilight Zone. Basically, the story revolves around these, I believe they were 10 feet tall alien beings that landed on Earth called Canimids. And they came to Earth and basically announced they're here to help the citizens of Earth. They gave us new farming techniques to take dry desert land and turn it into a fruitful soil to enough to the point where there's no more hunger or starvation on the planet. Uh, World wars were ended and peace treaties were signed. And as they referred to in the episode, is basically the coming of Santa Claus because it was the perfect world now. And they even they even had a lie detector test for the Canimids, and they passed them with flying colors. And they even built and designed a teleport aircraft kind of airport to transfer people from our planet to their planet. And people were so in love with their planet that they never came back to Earth. And in the meantime, the Canimids left this book at the world meetings or something like that. And when they finally found out the name of the book, it said "To Serve Man," and everyone was all happy. That peace is coming and everything is perfect. And then later on in the episode, you find out that "To Serve Man" is actually the famous line. It's a cookbook where the Canaanites are taking our citizens to their planet and killing them and cooking them for their food. And that scene has been done so many times and been parodied so many times, from The Simpsons to The Naked Gun 2.5 to more, and just a classic, classic scene. And to me, I always love the episode because it didn't end on a happy note. I'm always a big fan of these movies that don't end on happy notes. And the look of the Canaanites, they didn't talk. They had a voice, a mental voice, which was classic. And the look of them just looked terrific and would strike fear if you saw one of them. And that will end this video of Horrific Effects' top 13 Twilight Zone episodes. I hope you enjoyed it. I apologize. This is only my third real countdown video, so if I don't sound a little loosey-goosey or so forth, I apologize. I hope to get a little bit better at that, but I hope you enjoyed this countdown. And please feel free to check out all of the other videos here. We have a couple other countdown videos and some special effects makeup videos that I have done and so forth. So please feel free to check it out and hit that like button if you enjoy it. And thank you very much.